On September 8, 1966, NBC aired a television episode that almost never happened. The network had already rejected it once. The lead character with pointed ears was supposed to be cut, and the creator had been told his vision was too intelligent for American audiences. But at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the man trap beamed into living rooms across the country, launching a franchise that would span 6 decades. What viewers didn't know was that the chaos on screen was nothing compared to what happened behind the cameras. Gene Roddenberry was born Eugene Wesley Roddenberry on August 19, 1921, in El Paso, Texas. His father was a police officer who moved the family to Los Angeles when Gene was young. After flying 89 combat missions as a B-17 pilot during World War II, Roddenberry joined the Los Angeles Police Department in 1949, working the night shift while writing scripts during the day. He sold his first television script to Dragnet in 1954, and by 1956 he'd left the force entirely to pursue writing full-time. By the early 1960s, Roddenberry had created The Lieutenant for NBC and written episodes for Have Gun, Will Travel, and Dr. Kildare. But he wanted something different. In March 1964, he pitched NBC on a science fiction series he called Wagon Train to the Stars. The network ordered a pilot called The Cage, starring Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike. NBC executives watched it and delivered their verdict: too cerebral, too slow, not enough action. The show was dead, except it wasn't. In an almost unprecedented move, NBC ordered a second pilot. The network had never done this before, for a rejected series. Lucille Ball's production company, Desilu, was struggling financially, and Ball's support proved crucial in keeping the project alive. Desilu fronted the money for Where No Man Has Gone Before, and this time, NBC picked up the series. Without Desilu's backing, Star Trek would have ended before it began. Ball would later have to override her own board of directors to keep the show in production, a decision that would eventually contribute to her selling the studio to Paramount. The second pilot brought major changes. Jeffrey Hunter was out, replaced by a Canadian actor named William Shatner as Captain James Tiberius Kirk. But one element from the original pilot survived network interference: Spock. NBC executives had wanted the character removed entirely. They thought the pointed ears made him look demonic. According to Leonard Nimoy, one network executive said the character would frighten children. Test audiences had reacted negatively to Spock's appearance, but Roddenberry refused to cut him, and the network reluctantly agreed to keep the Vulcan science officer. Nimoy fought his own battles with the character. The pointed ears required extensive makeup that took over an hour to apply. The original ear prosthetics were painful and had to be redesigned multiple times. Nimoy developed the Vulcan nerve pinch himself when a script called for Spock to knock someone unconscious with a blow to the head. Nimoy thought it seemed too violent and proposed the alternative. The raised hand Vulcan salute came from Jewish religious services Nimoy attended as a child. It was the hand position of the Kohanim during certain blessings. The show's production schedule was brutal. Episodes were filmed in 6 to 8 days, with scripts often being rewritten during shooting. Writers worked around the clock. Roddenberry himself rewrote nearly every script that came through, often without credit. This created tension with the writing staff. Several prominent science fiction authors, including Harlan Ellison, Theodore Sturgeon, and Richard Matheson, wrote episodes, but many felt their work was being compromised. Ellison's The City on the Edge of Forever went through multiple rewrites, and Ellison publicly criticized the changes for years afterward. Behind the scenes, the cast dynamics were complicated. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy developed a competitive relationship that would last decades. When Nimoy started receiving more fan mail than Shatner, the scripts began giving Kirk more prominent storylines. Shatner reportedly counted lines in scripts to ensure he had the most dialogue. According to several cast members, Shatner would sometimes adjust his blocking during scenes to ensure he was in the best camera position. DeForest Kelley, who played Dr. Leonard McCoy, was hired specifically to balance the Kirk-Spock dynamic. Kelly had worked with Roddenberry before and was initially reluctant to commit to a television series. He was a character actor who preferred film work, but Roddenberry convinced him that McCoy would be the show's emotional center. Kelly ended up being the peacemaker on set, mediating tensions between cast members. The chemistry between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy became one of the show's most enduring elements, a trio that defined friendship across differences. Nichelle Nichols almost left the show after the first season. She'd been a singer and dancer before Star Trek and felt her role as Lieutenant Uhura wasn't substantial enough. She'd submitted her resignation to Roddenberry when she attended a fundraiser and met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. According to Nichols, King told her that Star Trek was one of the only shows his family watched, and that her presence as a black woman in a position of authority on the bridge was profoundly important. She withdrew her resignation the next day. King's words proved prophetic. Nichols would later inspire Dr. Mae Jemison to become the first African-American woman in space. The famous kiss between Kirk and Uhura in Plato's Stepchildren, broadcast on November 22, 1968, was scripted and carefully negotiated. NBC was nervous about showing an interracial kiss on network television. The script called for the characters to be forced to kiss by alien mind control, providing cover for the controversial moment. During filming, Shatner and Nichols deliberately sabotaged takes where they didn't actually kiss, forcing the director to use footage where their lips made contact. Some Southern stations refused to air the episode. Yet the response was overwhelmingly positive, with one of the largest batches of fan mail the show ever received. Budget constraints shaped the show's visual identity. The Enterprise sets were built on Desilu sound stages that had previously housed The Untouchables and Mission Impossible. The transporter effect was created because the show couldn't afford to film shuttle landings every episode. The transporter pad set itself cost only $600 to build. The iconic whooshing doors were operated by stagehands, pulling them open manually on cue. You can sometimes hear the scraping sound in episodes. The show's special effects were created by Howard Anderson and the Westheimer Company. The Enterprise miniature was 8 feet long and cost $30,000 to build. Effects shots were filmed by carefully moving the camera around the stationary model. Planets were either painted spheres or photographs of balloons, with continents added. The phaser effects were hand-animated onto the film, frame by frame. One effects artist, Linwood Dunn, had worked on Citizen Kane and King Kong. Despite the limited budget, these effects created a believable future that captivated audiences. Roddenberry's personal life created complications during production. He was married to Eileen Anita Rexroth, but he began an affair with Majel Barrett, who played Nurse Christine Chappell. Barrett had played number 1 in the rejected first pilot, and Roddenberry fought to keep her on the show in some capacity. The relationship was an open secret on set. Roddenberry would eventually divorce his wife and marry Barrett in 1969, shortly after Star Trek's cancellation. Barrett would remain involved with Star Trek for the rest of her life, appearing in multiple series and films. The show struggled with ratings throughout its run. NBC placed it in a difficult Friday night time slot against tough competition. By the second season, cancellation seemed certain. Fans organized a letter-writing campaign that generated over 1 million pieces of mail to NBC. The network renewed the show for a third season, but moved it to the Friday 10 p.m. time slot, essentially a death sentence for ratings. The campaign to save Star Trek was one of the first major fan movements in television history, demonstrating the power of dedicated viewers to influence network decisions. The third season had a drastically reduced budget. Sets were reused repeatedly. Guest stars were harder to book. Roddenberry stepped back from day-to-day production, burned out from fighting with the network. Fred Freiberger took over as producer, and the show took a noticeably different direction. Episodes like Spock's Brain and The Way to Eden became infamous among fans for their quality. The cast knew cancellation was coming. By spring 1969, they were filming the series finale, Turnabout Intruder, which aired on June 3, 1969. What happened next was unexpected. In syndication, Star Trek found its audience. Local stations began airing reruns in the early 1970s, and conventions organized by fans started drawing thousands of attendees. The show that NBC had given up on was building a cultural movement. By 1972, the first official Star Trek convention was held in New York City, expecting a few hundred attendees, but drawing over 1,000. The phenomenon was just beginning. NASA had originally planned to name its first space shuttle Constitution in honor of the nation's bicentennial. But Star Trek fans launched a massive letter-writing campaign, sending hundreds of thousands of letters to President Gerald Ford and NASA. Ford supported the change. And on September 17, 1976, the Space Shuttle Enterprise was unveiled at Rockwell's facility in Palmdale, California. Roddenberry and most of the original cast attended the ceremony, where the Air Force Band played Alexander Courage's Star Trek theme as the shuttle rolled out. The Enterprise never flew in space, but it paved the way for the shuttles that would. The show's influence on real technology is well documented. Martin Cooper, who led the team that developed the first mobile phone at Motorola, cited the communicator as inspiration. The automated door sensors now found in stores and hospitals were partly inspired by the Enterprise's doors. Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space, became an astronaut because of Lieutenant Uhura. She even appeared in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Countless engineers, scientists, and astronauts have cited Star Trek as the spark that ignited their careers. Star Trek ended after 3 seasons and 79 episodes, but Roddenberry's creation didn't stay canceled. The franchise would return with movies in 1979, followed by The Next Generation in 1987, and continued success that spans multiple series and films to this day. The cultural impact exceeded anything the creator imagined that day in 1964 when he walked into NBC's offices with his pitch. The show that was almost never made, with the character that nearly got cut, became one of the most enduring stories in entertainment history. What Star Trek secret surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into television history, subscribe to When TV Was.